On 4 September 1720, Giovanni Battista Piranesi was born. The son of a stonemason, he became famous for his copperplate engravings depicting the ruins of gigantic buildings. Near the ruins, you can see people for whom these decorations are too big. It is obvious that life here is recent. The people are just trying to survive in unfamiliar conditions. Official historians have called this genre of fine art capriccio, from Italian, caprice, fantasy. They like to give such names in order to immediately create in people the opinion they need. Here and Piranesi did not bypass. It is believed that all his engravings are the fruit of an inflamed imagination, as if he suffered from gigantomania and created images that do not fit into our reality. And he didn't choose the easiest way to do it. He could have drawn his fantasies with a pencil on paper, as school children draw in textbooks when they are bored in class. But no, he wanted fame. So he chose a more labor-intensive but almost eternal method, etching. This is a special kind of engraving on metal in which the surface is etched with acids, hence the name. In French, eau forte means strong water, which was the name given to nitric acid in those days. However, in my opinion, for Piranesi's works, the name chalcography, from the Greek chalkos, copper, and grapho, writing, would be more accurate. So why was this technique called by the unsavory word etching when there is a more precise designation? Probably to avoid the accidental association between chalcography and photography, since both involve the application of an image. In 1738, the National Cartography was organized, which later became the Central Institute of Graphic Arts of Italy. It was it, under the direction of the Vatican, that bought up all the copper plates with engravings. Apparently, the fictional dilapidated buildings that Piranesi invented were of special value to them. They had to buy up a lot. Despite his short life, only 58 years, the master not only managed to raise and educate several children, but also created about 1,500 engravings on copper plates. If the official history is to be believed, from 1743, when he presented the first engravings, until his death in 1778, the master created engravings on average every 8.5 days. Notice that it was only 5 years after the vaults for them were opened. What a coincidence. And if we exclude Piranesi's last days, when he was very ill, constant contact with nitric acid apparently does not go in vain. He worked even faster. Quite a high output, considering that he was also an architect and archaeologist, and work in such fields requires a lot of time. Giovanni's technique for making etchings, called etching, is quite simple. An acid-resistant varnish is applied to a forged copper plate. The master then scratches the image he wants to obtain with a sharp tool. After that, nitric acid is applied to the surface of the plate, which etches the metal in places where there is no lacquer. Depending on the duration of exposure to the acid and the number of treatments, depressions are formed in the metal, thanks to which the image is created. The finished engraving is covered with paint, and many paper prints are printed from this cliché. Very convenient. You make one engraving and the image can be distributed and sold in any quantity. Apparently, Giovanni wanted as many people as possible to familiarize themselves with his fantasies. In general, this is an interesting topic. Engravings in principle assume the presence of mass media in those slumbering times. Otherwise, how to explain the necessity of mass production of such engravings by different masters in different epochs? Still, a black and white print from an engraving loses a lot in the artistic sense to color paintings by other masters. For example, Piranesi's namesake, Giovanni Battista Tiepolo, but the engravings are more informational than purely artistic. It is more like a photo report from the scene of events, like those we see in modern newspapers. Speaking of newspapers, how did they used to print photos in newspapers? Watch your hands. You take a copper plate and cover it with a special solution called photoresist. This solution hardens and thickens when exposed to light. Then the plate is washed with warm water and the photoresist that has not hardened is washed off. Only the solution that has been exposed to light remains. Further actions are already familiar to us. The plate is treated with nitric acid, which etches out the metal unprotected by photoresist. The result is an engraving which, when inked, makes an imprint of the photograph on the newspaper. Official science says that photo engraving appeared in the 1830s, not earlier. Although if Piranesi had been able to project an image onto a copper plate coated with the right compound, he would have been able to fix it in the form of an engraving. And how do you project this image? It's very simple. A pinhole camera. It was mentioned by Aristotle and later described by Leonardo da Vinci in 1519, so at that time it was already known about it. In the 16th century, the camera was improved by inserting a lens. True, historians say that stupid ancient people did not know how to fix the image of the camera, so they just outlined it with a pencil. So if we assume that Giovanni Battista Piranesi, being an archaeologist, was engaged in research of real ruins, thus measured their sizes, made a written description, and also fixed the image of these buildings on copper sheets with the help of a camera obscura. Just assume that the composition of the photoresist solution was already known. The rest, as they say, is a matter of technique. Then his high productivity becomes clear. He took pictures and then made engravings from them in the laboratory. There are several arguments in favor of this assumption. There are at least a few engravings depicting buildings that are still around today. Pay attention to some details, which the master brought to us as accurately as possible. Does it look like a free depiction of reality in the style of "I see it this way"? The captions under the engravings also prove our version. A large gallery of statues with a structure of arches and with light falling from the ceiling. The gallery is situated in the middle of two spacious courtyards and is reached by magnificent staircases. There are statues, ancient bas-reliefs, inscriptions, burials, and various ornaments. A group of columns supports the two arches of the large courtyard. At the pedestals of the columns are beautiful fountains and staircases by which one can ascend to the Catholic altar, decorated with statues. In summer, there are other staircases leading to the apartments, an ancient mausoleum erected for the ashes of some Roman emperor. Around it is a pyramidal burial ground for other emperors. There are also urns with the ashes of their family members called sarcophagi, and there are other tombs for slaves and freedmen. This mausoleum is surrounded by fine staircases, at the base of which can be seen ornaments characteristic of Roman burials, a gloomy cell with devices for punishing or executing criminals. Upstairs, in the distance, one can see staircases that lead to floors covered with maps. These captions look like descriptions of photographs and reports of archaeological expeditions, and certainly not like descriptions of the author's fantasies. Now, with the help of Photoshop, you can make a photo look like an antique or like an engraving. And if you try to do the opposite from an engraving photo, and here's another thing, what is not a photograph? A very accurate depiction of small details, as well as the shape of clouds and falling light. They can tell a lot to a specialist, but I think you can already see the realism, which is hard to get by scratching out images on metal, some of which you have to look at through a magnifying glass. There is one more feature by which the method of making an engraving is determined, and that is the mark of the tool used to scrape the metal. Working with sharp tips leaves triangular marks with varying degrees of burial, as well as fringes around the edges of the scratches. But on the engravings created with the help of light impact on photoresist at high magnification, round dots are visible. The same dots are visible on Piranesi's engravings. All these facts convince us that the master very accurately recorded everything he saw on photo engravings, the normal work of an ordinary archaeologist. On his engravings, we see traces of the past civilization. Buildings and constructions were destroyed by powerful blows, and then everything was flooded with clay. And the fact that the people of this past civilization were bigger than us is evident not only from the ruins of huge complexes, but also from the skulls that can be seen on this engraving. Compare the heads of the people and the skulls lying on the ground. Or here's another engraving. Did Piranesi fantasize this too? Then what about these pictures? And what are these footprints? Maybe the owners of these limbs? Look at people who are obviously bigger than us. Here, for example, is Fyodor Andreevich Makhnov, originally from Russia. Learn more about giants in the video the hidden truth about the progenitors of mankind, our giant ancestors, link in the description. Historians say that for the first time it was possible to fix the image in 1826, Joseph Nicephore Niepce. But we'd rather believe what we see. Giovanni Battista Piranesi didn't scratch out his engravings, he simply made photo engravings using technology that supposedly didn't appear until the 1830s. As it is, historians go to great lengths to hide the real truth. And this story of buying up all the copperplate engravings, and for us cliches for printing photo prints, smells bad. Why then didn't they buy up all the artists' paintings to supposedly preserve them? And do we see all the prints? I think many are hidden safely in vaults so as not to raise questions. But I have questions. In what place was the master to draw, or rather photograph, these engravings? Good luck to everyone.